Hey guys, Greg Benz here. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can focus your camera in extremely dark situations such as shooting the Milky Way when you cannot use the autofocus system in your camera. I'm going to shoot this lighthouse tonight, and even though it's probably going to be lit and bright enough for me to focus on the lighthouse, many times I'm shooting the Milky Way or other night scenes and I don't have anything bright to focus on. So it's critical to understand the various techniques you can use to focus your camera when you cannot rely on autofocus. It's a crutch that many of us are used to, but knowing a few quick tips, manual focus is a breeze, even at night. So first, a couple of notes on equipment. I've got a 50mm f1.4 lens on my camera right now. You don't need a lens quite as fast as that, but having a wider aperture on your lens really helps. It lets in more light, which not only helps the shot, but it helps focus. It's going to be much easier to focus with an f1.4 lens than something like an f2.8. And certainly much better than using something like an f4. I'm not saying you can't use those other lenses. I use an f2.8 lens all the time very successfully. But when you get to something like an f4 or an f5.6, you may not be able to focus using some of the techniques I'll show you tonight. And I'll show you a variety of different ways you can achieve focus. So don't let gear stop you, but if you have the option, go with a faster aperture. Even if you're not going to use the aperture in the photo, it's going to help you with focusing. Next, obviously you'll need a tripod. We're going to be shooting in dark conditions, but not only that, you need to put your camera on a tripod, achieve focus, and then shoot with that focus locked down. So you need to have your camera in manual focus mode. So either take the camera and put it in manual focus, or your lens and put it in manual focus. If the camera tries to autofocus when you take your shot, then you're going to lose your focus when you do that. And lastly, I use a Petzl headlamp, so I can strap this to my head, and I have a light, which is very helpful for seeing my gear and safely walking around at night, but it also can be very helpful for shooting foreground objects. I don't know what my composition is going to be yet tonight, but if I include the rocks in the foreground, I want to make sure that I can shoot a frame with them in focus, so I can focus stack with the stars in focus as well. And to do that, I need something to light the rocks. You could use a very powerful flashlight, like a mag light would work well, or a very powerful headlamp like this. Don't use just any headlamp. Make sure you get the brightest one possible. This is a Petzl Tikka RXP, which has a boost mode on it that goes to something like 300 plus lumens. I don't know what the number is, but it's very bright for a headlamp, and it's critical because if it's not bright, you're not going to be able to focus on any nearby objects. This lens is bright enough that with my f2.8 lens, which is my 14 to 24 f2.8 that I use for a lot of wide angle night shots, I can focus on trees that are 50 feet away when I put this in the boost mode. So it's very, very helpful to have this. So some kind of a bright light is going to help you focus with the light. Now, if you don't have this, another way you can focus is simply to get your camera locked in a position before the sun goes down. Even when it's getting relatively dark like this, you'll be able to focus and then just simply keep your focus locked in for the shot later on. In fact, you can even put gaffer's tape on the focus ring to keep that focus ring from turning later if you're worried about that getting bumped. So locking the focus in advance will work for any lens, and you don't need any special techniques. You just need the patience to set up in advance and leave the equipment alone after that. The last technique that I use is to focus using live view once things get dark out. And to do that, you're going to want to make sure you understand roughly where the infinite focus is on your lens, because live view is not going to work when it's so far off the mark. If I'm focused to 10 feet away, I won't be able to see any stars in the live view. I'll just see noise. But once I get relatively close to the proper focus, I'll be able to see a blurry star, and then I'll be able to manually tweak the focus to get that star sharp. So make sure you understand where the infinite focus is on your lens before things get dark, and just use that as a reference, even if you're still going to manually tweak on the stars later. So the Milky Way won't be out for a couple of hours yet, so I'm going to get set up, and I'll be back with you in a couple of hours, and I'll show you how I use live view to actually focus on the stars and get the final shot. So I didn't wait for the Milky Way simply because the lighthouse is not lit, but another photographer showed up with a friend, and they're light painting this lighthouse, which is going to work out very conveniently. So I'm manually focusing right now on the lighthouse, and this is one key way of focusing at night. If you have man-made structures or some kind of light source that's just in the scene, you can use that to focus. Just bear in mind that you're going to be focusing on whatever distance that is, so it needs to be relevant to the shot you're taking. If it's not a distant subject, then you're not going to get focus for the stars. Now I'm going to show you how we can focus in the foreground. I'm using my headlamp to focus in the foreground. We're at f1.4, which is critical to be able to see this kind of detail and I have my headlamp set to the boost mode, and it just went off boost, so you can see there's a huge difference just having the boost on. But I'm able to manually rotate the focus ring on my barrel of the lens to get this focus. So I've got a great focus on the foreground, I'm able to focus on that lighthouse, and now let's take a look at how we can focus on the stars. So I'm going to zoom all the way up there, and you can just barely see this star, and we'll zoom in on it, and we can see it's not perfectly focused, and as I turn the focus ring, I've made it completely out of focus. In fact, if it's not close to infinity, then it's going to be black. So you need to get relatively close to infinity to even see a blurry star in order to be able to finally focus the lens. So I'm going to turn it back here, so we'll be able to fine tune it. And you can always, mark your the barrel of your lens or look if you need to see where infinity is. And now we're just going to simply turn this until we make this point of light as small as possible. So as I tune it, I'm just trying to get it tweaked so the star it just becomes as much of a single dot as possible. There's a little bit of a flare going on because of the spray. There's a lot of humidity in the air, but that's pretty close, and I think that's a focus star right in about there. So I'm going to shoot that, and let's take a look at the finished image, which I think looks great. I've got the foreground, I've got the stars, everything came out great. I did shoot this foreground more at the blue hour and combined the shots all together. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to shoot low light images for the stars. And please subscribe at gregbensphotography.com/newsletter to get more photography tips and tricks like this. Thank you.